Development Sustainable Food Lab. Ms. Stefani, to kindly come over, please. Yeah. I would also like to call upon Mr. Sanjay Kajuria, Director, Corporate Affairs and Sustainability, Nestle India Limited. Presentation by Dr. Y. Raghuramulu, Retired Director of Research, Coffee Board of India, and the esteemed panel for the panel discussion, Mr. Deepak Kaul, Senior Vice President and Head EMEA and India, Olam Food Ingredients, Mr. Saurabh Sinha, Senior Manager, Lead South India Programs, IDH, and finally, Mr. Nishant Gupta, Strategic Liaison, Walmart Foundation in India. So let's welcome all the panelists. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before the chair takes over, it's indeed my privilege to give a very quick intro about Mr. Paul Stewart. He's a Global Coffee Director at TechnoServe, where he oversees partnerships with the world's leading companies, foundations, and public sector agencies to increase the coffee income of farmers across Africa, Latin America, and India. Now, since joining TechnoServe in 2002, please note, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Stewart has helped build its coffee practice into a recognized leader in shared value solutions that reduce poverty, which is very, very important, that reduce poverty for farmers while developing sustainable supply chains for coffee businesses. He holds a degree in agricultural economics from Queen's University, Belfast, and has spent more than 2 decades of his career in East Africa. So let's give a round of applause for our chair, Mr. Paul Stewart. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by just thanking the conference organizers for bringing together this incredible group of experts on this subject of living income. And we really have an incredible panel here. We have Stephanie, who is really one of the leaders in thinking about and defining living income and how is advising a lot of companies on how to build living income frameworks into their business model. We also have a representative from the largest food and beverage company in the world, that's Nestle. We also have a representative from the largest retailer in the world, that's Walmart. So we really have some great perspectives on this subject. If you've never heard of the term living income, then you're in the right place, because you're really going to learn about what this means and what it really means to your business or whatever entity that you're working for. And if you are familiar with living income, then we have something for you as well, because we have some great examples of success stories. We're really talking about true impact on the ground in this session, and we're going to hear some fantastic stories of impact that we believe can be replicated and taken to scale. You know, our conference theme is sustainability through circular economy and regenerative agriculture. And living income is absolutely at the core of sustainability and regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture isn't just about reducing carbon emissions, healthier soils, and greater biodiversity. A regenerative coffee farm must have at its center a family who are thriving, not just surviving. We have 3 excellent speakers and 3 panelists today who are going to share their perspectives and join us in what I expect is going to be a very lively discussion. Our first speaker is Dr. Stephanie Daniels. Stephanie is a Senior Program Director at the Sustainable Food Lab, where she manages impact and learning partnerships focused on living income and sustainable livelihoods. She's co-founder of the Living Income Community of Practice, and she serves as the Alliance for Living Income in Cocoa and co-facilitates the ICO technical workstream on living prosperous income. Stephanie, up to you.
And particularly the Coffee Board of India for the invitation to be here with you. It's really been a pleasure to be here this week and learn about your beautiful and diverse coffee sector. So I had some slides. I don't know if those will come, but maybe I'll just start to say I'm speaking here today in my role with the ICO to facilitate a technical work stream, as Paul said, on the topic of living income and prosperity, which includes 13 countries, one of which is India, 3 regional platforms, 12 industry actors, and 15 observer organizations dedicated to the alignment of globally comparable methods to understand farmer incomes more deeply, to support dialogue on solutions to improve farmer incomes, and share knowledge across regions and between countries. So as many of you know, the ICO founded the Coffee Public-Private Task Force after the signing of the London Declaration and developed a 10-year roadmap. It's an ambitious vision which has the goal of a sustainable and prosperous future for coffee producers and the sector as a whole. The concept of living income as a milestone for prosperity is a core tenet of the roadmap. And I'd like to kick off this session with clarifying the definition of that term, living income, and how it's being used in the ICO to address the problems of low incomes, particularly of small-scale farmers. So put simply, living income is the, we have a different slide. Okay, living income is the net income required for a household to afford a decent standard of living. This represents the elements of a living which is based on key elements of decency, meaning a nutritious diet, decent housing, and other essential elements of healthcare, education, transport. It's typically defined by a quantitative process based on national data, pegged to national and international norms, such as the dietary definitions for decent nutrition at the WHO, and then validated by fieldwork in coffee-growing regions. And it answers the question, how much does a typical household in a particular place need to earn from all their income sources to afford this decent standard of living? And in the ICO effort, we've been mapping what benchmarks already exist and have a collaborative pre-competitive effort to work with 9 ICO member countries to calculate these for themselves. So I just want to talk about the concept of living income, and is this a definitive goal, quantitative goal? So the concept of living income goes a step beyond traditional notions of poverty alleviation that are concerned with basic subsistence and survival, typically measured by the poverty line. Living income puts a strong emphasis on the idea of decency and earning enough income to live comfortably. However, in some countries, this level is actually quite high for some small-scale coffee farmers. And so we must never use the living income concept as a reason to exclude smallholders from the trade. We want to avoid at all costs that this aspirational threshold becomes a barrier to market access, but rather consider the strategies that can move families along pathways to prosperity. This is a graphic that we use in the ICO task force to show the different levels of economic prosperity that can be achieved, and it's important to not see one as either a minimum or a ceiling. So the strategies or pathways to prosperity will obviously look quite different for different kinds of farmers. Those who have, for example, half a hectare of land will undoubtedly need off-farm income, while those with adequate land access might more need interventions like technical assistance, better market access, many of the things we've heard today. Women farmers may need different programs than male farmers. So on the other side, we also don't want to look at living income as a ceiling. Coffee is a sector where much prosperity has been created. Coffee can be a good option for rural families, but to reach and exceed the living benchmark levels in any location and to reach towards prosperity and long-term prosperous incomes, farmers need key assets like skills, finance, and land, and they require agronomic, trade, and technical assistance, which they can take advantage of those assets to thrive. So I want to tell a very short story to bring this concept to life. So this is Robinson. He's a young Colombian coffee farmer that I met a few years ago, and I asked him, and he let me use his picture to tell his story, to do this example. He has 1.3 hectares of shade-grown coffee. Meeting him and walking through he and his wife Sylvia's farm was really a visceral experience of of seeing sustainable, regenerative, and profitable small-scale coffee farming. Robinson decided to move back from the city to grow coffee on his grandfather's coffee plot, and their farm is beautiful and also profitable. Their passion, their entrepreneurial spirit, their farming skill are definite elements of their success. However, they also have the advantage of several enabling conditions, which are critical. The market he is selling into works. He sells his coffee into a high-value market in which he receives a dependable and steady premium for quality. Prices are transparent, shared every season along with volumes. Technical assistance and support is sustained and high quality. He is part of a supportive peer farmer network, and he's starting to become a coach to his neighbors himself. And I think one of the most important aspects is he's in an enabling environment, a country that has invested in the infrastructure for profitable coffee, to move it efficiently, to have an R&D program, to have climate-resilient varietals, a national agronomy system, and even investing in marketing and branding, which translates into market pull, both domestically and for export. So Robinson's story gives us an example of the multiple factors and the multiple actors that need to come into play to ensure that coffee farmers can thrive. So the living income analysis being done within the ICO member countries and supported by regional platforms in all three regions. We have Proma Café in Mesoamerica, the Inter-African Coffee Organization in Africa, and the ASEAN Coffee Federation in Asia, are intended to be a strategic input to dialogue and investment strategies that can develop these resilient pathways to prosperity. A clear message from the task force is that a number of strategies must be invested in together and quickly to address the deep challenges facing farmers. And all of these, I think all of them have been talked about at the conference so far. For example, a better financing ecosystem, including that for global R&D, a global system for payment for ecosystem services that actually works for smallholders, deeper investment in the enabling environment, such as healthcare, infrastructure, education, increasing the demand and the value addition in domestic markets and intra-regional trade, increasing transparency of pricing, value distribution, and value addition, mechanisms that can both stabilize and protect incomes in periods of shock, either climate or market shocks, and finally, as we heard on the last panel, mechanisms to ensure all countries understand and are prepared for the changing regulatory environment. This is all part of the enabling environment to reach improve living conditions and reach living income for all farmers. So to close, I just want to say, again, underline the point of shared responsibility and the need for distributed leadership in the sector. So certainly the responsibility for living income does not rest with one actor alone. It is about prices, but it's not only about prices. It is about social services, but it's not only about social services. We need the industry to step up and ensure farmers are receiving stable and fair prices that allow them not only cover their cost of production, but also support them to manage climate risks and improve yields. Origin governments surely need to invest in the proactive and well-resourced policies that we see in many countries that build an enabling environment for both coffee and other forms of agriculture. Importing governments need to co-invest in a just transition for farmers, especially if higher environmental and social outcomes are being demanded. And multi-stakeholder and intergovernmental organizations like the ICO need to continue to support the global dialogue on those issues that cannot be solved at the national level. And with this enabling environment, farmers themselves, the key ingredient in the cup of coffee, will be able to continuously improve their operations, to innovate, to invest in their farms, and to be dedicated to producing quality and regenerative coffee. So this is not an easy challenge, and I think having an aspirational vision is still worth it. It allows the sector to quantify what it will take to get there, and I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be here and have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for really laying out the framework of the living income methodology and really that call for all actors to really be involved in this very important topic. We're now going to turn our attention to some great examples of work that's being done by different organizations and businesses to really strive to support increases in incomes to go beyond living income. So our second speaker is Mr. Sanjay Kajaria, who is the Director of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Nestlé India. With over 30 years experience in the food industry, Sanjay has steered impactful community initiatives focused on nutrition awareness, rural development, water and sanitation facilities that have touched the lives of over 10 million beneficiaries. Sanjay is also the president of the Confederation of Indian Food Trade and Industry that provides institutional support for the development of the Indian food processing sector. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks a lot for this opportunity. Next few minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the work which we are doing with coffee farmers as part of Nescafe plan, which some of you may have heard of. A quick word on Indian coffee scenario, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. There are about 220,000 coffee farmers in India. 98% of them are small growers, largely cultivated in Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Orissa. Karnataka, where we are now, produces maximum coffee. Really, some of the coffee farms which you will see are the best examples of agroforestry. Nescafe plan, just to put it in perspective, globally started in 2010. And in 2012, we launched the Nescafe plan in India. The picture you see here is 10 years old, and it was inaugurated by the then coffee chair, Mr. Javed Akhtar. We also started a demo farm in Kushalnagar that time and a training center as well. So what does really Nescafe plan entail? I think we have looked at the work which we are doing with or can do with the farmers, the work which gets done with the communities, and the work which gets done with the planet. As far as farmers are concerned, the ambition and aim is that we are enabling healthier and happier lives. On community, helping communities really thrive, not only the coffee farmers, but communities at large, and planet, and what we are discussing for last couple of days here, really how to make sure that the sustainable practices and the work which we are doing make sure that the fields remain for the generations to come as well. A quick word on the work which is being done on farmer. I think one of the areas where we took a conscious decision that whatever work gets done, it should be transparent and there should be traceability. And the reason for this is we want to see the positive outcome in the farm. And when you do this analysis, if there is an improvement required, we keep altering the program to suit that requirement. We support farmers in improving the quality of coffee. We support farmers in yield improvement. Very happy to report on year-on-year basis, we are seeing wherever the farmer communities are engaged, the yield is going up. One of the key area, and we were talking about this, Stephanie, is really the living wage or livelihood improvement. At every head, there is a scope of reducing the cost for the farmers, which finally leads to increased income by the farmers. We support farmers on doing that. We work on crop protection, the best nutrition for the crop. The stakeholder, which is the farmer community here, I must say, is most receptive when it comes to good suggestions. We started talking to the farmers for some time on carbon footprint, whether it's to do with the equipment which is used in the farms or the activities which get taken place. Enhanced biodiversity. What all support biodiversity is an engagement which Nescafe plan has with the farmers. Agroforestry, again, very happy to report that many of the farms on which we work and we engage with farmers, we see a lot of shade trees coming in. We see bee cultivation becoming bigger and bigger. We also support farmers on intercropping. So typically every farm will also have pepper, banana, betel nut, and so on and so forth. And really the aspiration and ambition is that we keep working with the farming community on training them, learning from them, and build the competencies not at the farm level, but also the training which is being provided to them. The second area where we work in is really the safety and health of coffee community. Here we also run the health camps for them where they can and their neighbors can and the whole ecosystem can come and get knowledge on what is the safety and health required at the farm. We also do health camps for them. Again, for the community, it is enhanced biodiversity, how that can be supported. And there is a lot of social initiative in addition to the work which is done at the farm, which is being done, and I'll briefly touch upon that. Coming to planet, water is a very scarce commodity, so we look at the best irrigation methodology, whether it's sprinklers or others, how much water is really required at the farm level and work with the farmers on that. A reduction in water usage, many ideas, mulching or whatever. Soil organic matter, regular testing of soil gets done to ensure that the soil organic and the nutrition are complementary to each other. I seem to have lost my presentation, but it will come back. Anyway, to continue with that, we also look at soil erosion and how to make sure that the erosion of the soil doesn't happen, and what are the actions which farmers along with other stakeholders can take. And lastly, in this area, we also look at working with communities and to see that how do we create an ecosystem where everyone is conscious about how to reduce, let's say, greenhouse gas emission. Sometimes it is by action can you see the presentation now? Thank you. A lot of work on soil health assessment and what nutrient needs to go to make sure that the crop retains that health. And year on year, it gets tested whether the soil health is going down, deteriorating, or getting better. I brought you some pictures from the demo farm which we have in Kushal Nagar. You can see the classrooms. Really, this is a document which has been created with the help of very knowledgeable and experts. We call it Nescafe Better Farming Practices. The farmer colleagues who come to these farms, they actually go through these practices, and some of these are really live example of what they do. A lot of our farmers, close to 3,000 now, are actually engaged on 4C compliances. Soil health management is also shown at the demo farm. In addition to this, we also try and create some social work around the farming ecosystem. Some pictures you see here, I mentioned about the medical camp for farmers and also people who work in those farms. We put water fountains in schools to encourage students to learn the value of clean drinking water and also provide these fountains to them. Very happy to report that they then become the ambassador for water conservation, preservation, and clean drinking water. The sanitation facilities are put in schools where the girl child comes. And again, we have seen that the attendance is increased when we see the sanitation facilities being put in these schools. We have been working on this, as I mentioned, for last 12 years globally and 10 years in India. But now we are going to have a plan which we call Nescafe Plan 2030. 3 areas really to look at. How to make sure that agroforestry, this is all part of region agriculture, helping the farming community, the farmers and the planet. What we are looking at, how to increase the agroforestry. We are also trying to see how we reduce GHG emission and how to increase and improve the livelihood for the farming community. I wanted to take you to the farms, but because of paucity of your time, that is not possible. So there is a short video which will encapsulate whatever I have been speaking for last few minutes Hope you like it.
ನಾನು 25 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಕಾಫಿ ಬೆಳೆಗಾರ. ನಾನು ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್. ನಾನು 2012ರಿಂದ ನೆಸ್ಕೆಫೆ ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾನಿಗೆ ಭಾಗಿಯಾಗಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಕುಶನಗರ ಡೆಮೋ ಫಾರ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿದರು. ನಮಗೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಸಲಹೆ ಬೇಕಿದ್ದರೆ ಅವರು ಬಂದು ನಮ್ಮ ತೋಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಲಹೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು. 4C ಸರ್ಟಿಫಿಕೇಟಿಗೆ ಭಾಗಿಯಾಗಿದ್ದೀನಿ.
ನೆಸ್ಲೆ ಆಫೀಸರು ನನ್ನ ಮಗನಿಗೆ ಸಲಹೆ ನೀಡಿದ್ದರಿಂದ ನನಗೆ ಸಂತೋಷ.
ನೆಸ್ಕಾಫೆ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಜೊತೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಲು ಶುರುವಾದ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಾಫಿ ಕೃಷಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ತಿಳಿದುಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದರಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ಸಹ ಉತ್ತಮ ಸಲಹೆಯನ್ನು ನೀಡುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತಲಿನ ಶಾಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೆಸ್ಲೆಯವರು ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಕುಡಿಯುವ ನೀರಿನ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಹಾಗೂ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಶೌಚಾಲಯ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿರುವುದರಿಂದ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಉತ್ತಮವಾಗಿದೆ. ಹಾಗೂ ನೆಸ್ಲೆಯಿಂದ ಬರುವ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಆದಾಯದಿಂದಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಹಾಗೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನ ಶೈಲಿ ಉತ್ತಮವಾಗಿದೆ.
ನೆಸ್ಕೆಫೆ ಪ್ಲ್ಯಾನಿಂದ ಉತ್ತಮವಾಗಿ ಮಣ್ಣು ಪರೀಕ್ಷೆ, ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾನೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್, ಉತ್ತಮವಾಗಿ ವ್ಯವಸಾಯ ಪದ್ಧತಿ ಕಲ್ತಿದೆ. ನೆಸ್ಲೆ ಮೆಡಿಕಲ್ ಕ್ಯಾಂಪಿನಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಅನುಕೂಲವಾಗಿದೆ. ನಾನು ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದಂಥ ಗೊಬ್ಬರ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಹಾಕ್ತಾಯಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಕಾಫಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಈಲ್ಡು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು. ನೆಸ್ಕೆಫೆ ಉತ್ತಮ ವ್ಯವಸಾಯ ಪದ್ಧತಿಯಿಂದ ನನ್ನ ಕಾಫಿಯ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಟಿಯು ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ನನಗೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ರೇಟು ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ, ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಪ್ರೀಮಿಯಮು ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sanjay. And we heard there some of Nestle's, which obviously is the largest coffee roaster in the world, some of the work they're doing with their suppliers, focusing on farmer income. Not just on the coffee income, but we actually heard from Sanjay actually supporting diversification, income from other sources, and then taking that whole shared value approach. So thank you very much, Sanjay, for sharing some of those great examples from your work here in India. Our third speaker is Dr. Raghuramulu, who served in the Central Coffee Research Institute of the Coffee Board of India for 33 years. He worked in senior supervisory positions for 16 years, involved in planning, coordination, and monitoring of research projects, including multi-country research projects implemented by the FAO, Natural Resource Institute, and CIRAD. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Distinguished delegates, first of all, I would like to thank the Coffee Board of India and the entire organizing team for inviting me to share a story, a unique story about how coffee can bring in substantial changes in their livelihoods. I have taken one area which is Araku Valley, now globally recognized for producing quality Arabica beans. Before I go into my presentation, this is the structure of my presentation. Firstly, I would like to, I think there is one slide, okay. Firstly, I would like to tell about what are the distinguishing features of this area where we worked for the 5 decades with the tribal farmers, and how the coffee, which is known as a brown gold, has emerged in the barren hills. Once upon a time, there were barren hills in the tribal area, how it impacted the livelihoods of these native indigenous tribes. And after achieving the success of this program, the recent initiatives taken by the Coffee Board of India to replicate the same in other tribal regions in the country. If you look at the coffee growing map of India, the area which is shown as a brown in brown color, is a traditional coffee producing area which contributes close to 95 to 96% of the production of the country's coffee production. These traditional areas are basically located in the Western Ghats. You can see in the map on the Western Ghats, which are called as one of the hottest biodiversity hotspots in the world, and we consider them as lungs of India. So they are the biodiversity-rich forest, evergreen forests. On the other hand, what you see in the green color is the Eastern Ghats. Eastern Ghats are not as continuous as Western Ghats. They are discontinuous hills, mostly inhabited, especially in the area which is demarcated in yellow circle. That area is actually inhabited by indigenous tribes, remote, poor, illiterate tribes. So what is the comparison between the traditional coffee growing areas in the Western Ghats and the coffee grown in the Eastern Ghats by tribal people? See, we are actually, when we ventured into the non-traditional areas, they were not at all amenable for coffee cultivation. Because of the climatic conditions, the forests are not evergreen, the rainfall is not well distributed, and the temperature fluctuations are quite huge. Summers goes up to 39 degrees, whereas in winters it can go as low as 2 degrees Celsius, which are not very ideal for coffee cultivation. More than anything else, the soils in those areas were depleted or eroded because of the practice called slash and burn or shifting cultivation, which is locally known as Podu cultivation. And coffee in this area, as compared to the traditional area, which is a 2-century-old crop, it's being grown for more than 2 centuries now. In the Eastern Ghats, coffee is relatively a new crop and gained commercial importance only from 1970s onwards. So I more or less narrated these characteristic features. I would like to highlight what these indigenous people were accustomed to doing traditionally. They have a practice called shifting cultivation. They cut some area of the hills, grow cereals and some food crops, and once the soil becomes infertile, they migrate to a newer patch. As over a period of time, their population increased, pressure increased, the forest regeneration was not able to match up to the extent of degradation which is happening. That's why they were again pushed into absolute poverty. Their income levels were going very low. Earlier, in fact, they were living in a very harmonized manner. Because of the low population, vast areas, they were able to come back to the same place where they cut forest some 20 years ago and again cultivate. That was not available to them. So they do collect forest produce like wild honey and medicinal herbs to gain some other income for their living. But their lives were never, they were not having access to better markets because of the remote locations. So this is how typically a hamlet, they live in batches or families of 20, 25 families in a very remote, inaccessible areas. You can see this is how typically the terrain looks like. the tribal area in the Eastern Ghats, Araku Valley region. And the picture on the top, what you see is again land which is being brought into the cultivation, that is cereal cultivation by slashing and burning the forest cover. And the lower one, which they grow wherever they have a level field, they grow paddy and vegetables, which gives them some kind of food security. And what do? What they were doing, in fact, they continue to do even today is, they collect forest produce, they grow some crops, they take it to the weekly markets called shanties and sell it in those markets. And the local traders from plain areas go there and buy at dead cheap, damn cheap rates, don't pay them any fair price. And whatever they produce, excess beyond their consumption, they get very little income from that just to meet ends. This is a typical view of a tribal market on in different locations. It happens on different days of the week. Now coming to the story of the brown gold. See, this happened because there was some kind of history of coffee growing in that region. Way back in 1898, coffee was first introduced by a British collector. He was the collector of the district, introduced coffee on a trial basis, and he found that it could be grown to some extent. But 1920s onwards, the local princely states expanded coffee or brought coffee into a larger area. They could manage for some time, then they abandoned because they didn't have the technical backup from any organization at that point in time. Coffee Board came much later. And when Coffee Board came into existence in 1942, subsequently, when we were looking for areas where coffee can be expanded in the country, a techno-feasibility survey was done in the Eastern Ghats, where our technical team went and identified, provided if you have a tree cover, coffee can be grown here, if not at the same level of productivity, maybe at lower level. So the techno-feasibility study indicated that there is a suitability of coffee area in this region. So the first step after getting the inputs from the technical team was to introduce coffee in already existing forests, employing the tribal people as the workers so that they get an employment, they don't indulge in shifting cultivation. So about 4,000 hectares of coffee was planted by Andhra Pradesh Forest Development Corporation, which even today exists in productive phase. Around the same time, 1960, the neighboring state of Odisha, they introduced coffee mainly as a measure of preventing soil erosion in the very major river catchment area. But those areas, they could not continue to sustain and gave up. So the second stage, what we did is, Coffee Board and the local governments, directly we wanted to work with the tribal farmers instead of a government agency. So in 1972, a pilot project was started where the tribals were engaged as partners for coffee development. And then coffee was introduced, and a small piece of land, about an acre or a half hectare, was given to each tribe after 4 years of its maintenance. And starting at that journey, the second phase journey, working with the tribals, is a success story I'm highlighting here. So from 1975 onwards, the continuous planting program is going on with the help of Integrated Tribal Development Agency of the state government, that is the government of the Andhra Pradesh, as well as Coffee Board. And the main important stakeholder is the tribal farmer himself. So to actually provide technical backing to the entire program, Coffee Board has set up a very extensive research and transfer of technology network in these non-traditional areas, starting from 1972. And what is the status today of this endeavor, which has been there for last 5 decades? Today we have close to, Coffee Board, I just want to, I think I skipped one slide, I jumped one slide. So what is the role of Coffee Board here, you may ask? The state government, while it provides some kind of wages to the worker, tribal farmers when they are establishing plantation, Coffee Board provides technology support, technical support. More importantly, we provide the improved seed suitable for that particular areas. And we provide training to the farmers, provide some kind of assistance, small financial assistance, to help them improve their quality of their coffees. And more, recently in 2002, while we were trying to identify the unique geographic identities for coffee, we stumbled upon this Araku Valley coffee also having very good intrinsic qualities in the cup. So we created a special regional logo for Araku Valley coffee. And recently, in 2019, we have the distinction of getting the geographic indication tag, the first geographic indication tag for a tribal coffee in India. These are the steps involved in, in this tribal coffee project. Wherever the hill is identified, which is denuded by the shifting cultivation, we go there, we try to first prepare the land to prevent, terracing, things like that. Then plant shade trees. Once the shade trees grow to a height of about 6 to 7 feet after 2 years, the coffee is introduced under those shades. So here you can see the entire steps involved in planting the coffee and shade. And this is the result of this endeavor. Today you can see a large number of holdings, which in terms of appearance will look as good as coffees from traditional areas. So they have coffee as well as black pepper. You can see the lot of shade cover which has regenerated because of the coffee. And today we have achieved a target, an area of nearly close to 99,000 hectares under this tribal coffee development program, involving close to 220,000 tribal farmers in these agency areas. The productivity is quite not matching. It is only 152 kilos per hectare, primarily because of the climatic constraints, what I mentioned, depleted soils, but more importantly because the tribals do not, they do a kind of default organic way of farming, so that the productivity levels are low, though the quality is very high. So during the last 20 years, we have again taken another initiative in the same program, that every plantation which has been successfully established, we will introduce 5 types of fruit trees and 5 types of indigenous shade trees, so that the ecosystem will develop, biodiversity will increase, and also the farmers' income also will diversify. They don't need to depend purely on coffee prices, because coffee prices are always not very friendly to the farmers. Sometimes they are very good, but for a brief period and a larger period, they are not very remunerative to the farmers. So they are getting better income now. Sometimes I was told that 50% only they get income from coffee. Remaining 50% they get it from intercrops like black pepper, orange, some other fruits, timber, little bit, because timber also could be extracted in a phased manner once the shade becomes too much. There are a number of studies about how this effort, tripartite effort between Coffee Board of India, the state government, and the tribal stakeholders, what impact it has created. There are a number of studies, but I have taken the latest study, which involved about 90 tribal farmers from 15 different villages, in a stratified random sampling method done by a reputed institution. So they say the incomes have almost compared to the income from their crops, agricultural crops, the income from only coffee is fourfold. And income from coffee plus intercrops is fivefold. So you can see what is the, their income levels, how they have increased over a period of time. And in terms of the livelihood indicators, which Stephanie also was mentioning, there was an increase of 40 to 60% of the various parameters, either human capital or human or physical assets, or other societal improvements like healthcare and things like that. So there are 40 to 60% improvements happened when the coffee was introduced over the period of time. And my story will be incomplete if I just leave it at there. The story of Araku Valley has now reached another level. So Araku Valley today is recognized as one of the top quality producer of Arabica beans, because Arabica itself is a very difficult to grow under Indian conditions. So here we have number of players are now working at the ground level, the NGOs, with thousands of farmers, including the TechnoServe itself, which is recently entered the market. So to help the tribal farmers come together as a farmer-producer company so that they can get a better bargaining power, both upstream and downstream, and improve their income levels further. So a number of brands have already come out of this region, which in fact Araku Coffee, they have an outlet in Paris, which was set up about 8-9 years ago. So that is a story of this Araku Valley coffee. Now, having tasted the success with tribal farmers in Araku Valley, we wanted to replicate the same in the traditional coffee growing areas of Karnataka, because we have small pockets of tribal areas even within the traditional area. So we are working with those farmers now currently to improve their income levels through diversification, through quality improvement, through formation of collectives. And this is of course, these are the details of that recent initiative which is currently going on. And we have also achieved, some kind of traceability of these tribal coffees in Karnataka and branding, traceability. We are using the blockchain to document the traceability. This is the brand which is, of course, is available, exhibited in the exhibition area, Adavi Coffee. So this is another a story brewing fresh in tribal areas of Karnataka. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raghuramulu. That was a great presentation, a great example of how a government-led initiative can really change a landscape and really demonstrate how coffee can really be a source of good, not just for those farmer livelihoods, creating more sustainable incomes in the long term, but also showing how coffee can really help to protect the forest. And I think that's just fantastic. I would strongly encourage you, if you have never tasted the coffee from Araku Valley, please go to the exhibition hall and find one of the booths that are promoting the coffees. I know one which is a DV brand you can look for, and that's the only coffee I've been drinking, actually, I must admit, the last couple of days, and it really is some of the finest specialty coffees in the world. So if you haven't tasted it, you really got to go taste it. As we come now to our discussion session, I'd like to introduce three highly experienced leaders who are going to add to the topic here. We have Mr. Deepak Kaul, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of EMEA and India at Olam Food Ingredients, OFI. We also have Surabh Sinha, who's the Senior Manager for Food Crops and Ingredients at IDH India. And we also have Nishant Gupta, who is the Social and Environmental Impact Advisor at Walmart.org in India, and has recently taken on the role of Head of Sustainability of the Flipkart Group. Deepak, do you have the clicker? It's over here. Can we pass it? All right. Great. Deepak, I'd like to start with you, and I know you have a couple of good slides to share, which I definitely want to encourage you to do that. But I want to, I understand OFI has been calculating living income gaps in a number of countries where you're purchasing coffee. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've been learning and what OFI is doing to close the gap?
Thanks, Paul. And first of all, my gratitude to the organizers and the Coffee Board of India, our hosts, for this wonderful event. I'm really glad that we are having it in India, and it's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this panel today. We, as an organization, have been working on the topic of living income over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. As you would have gathered by now from the earlier presentation from Stephanie and the interventions from Sanjay and Dr. Raghuramulu, the topic of living income is a very complex topic. It involves a lot of elements of economic development that are perhaps outside the scope of the traditional coffee industry as we see. Therefore, it's important for us to understand what we as private organizations in our individual capacities and with collaborations and partnerships with our partners can do in order to make a difference in the livelihoods of coffee growers. Just as I won't take you through all my slides, but I just wanted to highlight this one. So we have developed together with, working together with other partners and also as part of the ICO task force on living income, we have developed a tool, a living income calculator, which we call the LIGHT tool, to be able to establish living income benchmarks and progress on living income across various countries. The tool is a digital tool which allows us to capture data from the source and then present it and visualize it in a form that is easy to understand. As you would see, we are able to track over time the change in the living income or the change in the income, the farm income that the farmer derives from his coffee and also from additional sources of revenue that he might have. The chart on the bottom left shows the progress of a particular project or a particular farmer group that we are working with from 2019 to 2021. And there is a substantial increase in terms of the living income of that group. Similarly, there are other visualization tools which help us to segment and see how the programs have been progressing. I think the critical element in all of this is to be able to identify what is it that we actually want to do. And we start the entire process by means of a segmentation exercise where we use 2 levels of segmentation. The first level is the segmentation of production types or production systems. And the second segmentation is the segmentation of the farmers based on their socioeconomic and demographic status within that ecosystem. And that allows us to then customize and tailor-make solutions which can then be used to help farmers improve their livelihood. We have now projects running across 6 countries, and I have 2 examples here, one from Uganda and the other one from Honduras. The project in Uganda, which is essentially working on improving yields and productivity, we have already over the course of the last 3 years achieved a 10% improvement in farmer income. The project in Honduras, for example, because of our segmentation strategy, we realized that the most important problem to solve was access to the market. And therefore, we implemented a digital sourcing solution in those farming communities that allows the farmers to access prices on a real-time basis and be able to engage with buyers directly in order to sort of eliminate the middleman where a lot of the value of the chain was getting lost. Last, and probably this is a very critical point, and maybe a little bit controversial as well. We need to understand that the problem of living income is not a coffee problem. It is an economic development problem. As you would see on the chart, 80% of the world's coffee is produced by farmers who are already earning a living income. So therefore, the problem is with only 20% of the world's coffee supply. However, having said that, the 20% of the coffee that is produced by farmers that don't make a living income actually constitutes about 60% of the coffee farmer population of the world. So therefore, it's a bit of a distribution problem in terms of identifying the farmers or the farming communities which are not making a living income, and therefore addressing solutions to those communities. We have heard in the earlier panels today that with regulations, with increasing concentration around specific origins, this exacerbates the problem of the more marginalized and the more vulnerable coffee producers. And therefore, we need to consider a more holistic approach towards identifying actual solutions that can be deployed on the ground and which will help alleviate the problem of living income. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Deepak. And I think that is a fantastic point to make. Like, we're not talking about all coffee farmers here who need support to reach and exceed the living income, but we need to be targeted, and I think that's really important. I want to come to Saurabh. So we've heard some examples of public sector, and we've heard some examples of private sector initiatives to improve coffee farmer livelihoods. At IDH, you focus on bringing together these public and private sector actors to collaborate. Could you share a bit on how IDH is doing this?
Okay, yeah, it's working. So good evening, everyone. My name is Saurabh. I represent IDH. IDH is a global social enterprise that works in nearly 50 countries, largely in Asia, Africa, as well as in South America. And the topic is very relevant. It's very close to our hearts, which is the fulcrum of discussions today. Income and income for farmers. Now, before coming to this slide, which mentions a smart mix, let me just present you a high-level framework that we use when it comes to living income for farmers. Okay. I hope my voice is clear. Yeah? Okay, perfect. So, a very important point raised by Deepak earlier, that what is a farmer? So for us, any initiative on farmer starts with first inclusion. And inclusion essentially is, how do you identify your farmer? Whom are you going to work with? What defines a farmer? Is it a land holding? Is it the type of crops that you produce? How do you identify that farmer? Once you have identified, the second part is integration. So you identify, how do you integrate a farmer into a particular project? Why should a smallholder actually be participating in some of these activities if he does not feel integrated in the entire system? And then you talk about empowerment, inclusion, integration, and then comes empowerment. You then look at what are the ways in which the farmers then can be empowered. And living income, a big topic of environmental management, all comes with that. Now coming to the question that was raised by Paul, that how do you do it on the ground practically? So here on this slide is a mix of strategies that have been shown, and I'll give you examples, practical examples, on how we have been doing it along with other partners. The first part, the most important bit, is the environment. How do you enable the environment in which different stakeholders, you will have a private sector company that has interest around profits, it has interests around meeting its sustainability criteria, You'll have traders in the supply chain who want to source coffee. You'll have civil society organizations who have their agenda. You have public sector, coffee board and other organizations who want to work on the welfare. You have, foundations such as Walmart Foundation who, again, wish to promote how do you work specifically with pharma aggregation units. So there are diverse interests of each partner. How do you bring or align them on one platform? The first example that I'd like to give is our program in Karnataka, which we are developing along with all these partners. It's called Karnataka Climate Resilient Coffee and Spices Landscape. And this program actually has brought in 7 partners all across the supply chain. We have representations from the roasters, Unilever, JD. We have representation from traders, Ecom, NKG, Sugden. We have representation from the pharma groups, around 5 FPOs who work. We have representation from civil society organizations, 3 of them. And we have collaboration with the Coffee Board of India. So now this platform is actually defining a public-private pharma civil society partnership together. And there are certain elements which are common to all of these stakeholders. The trick is how do you identify them, how do you convene them, and bring them onto a table. So that is where the initial efforts are needed. The second bit is around production and processing, which I have mentioned over here. And this is where the engagement around private sector, government, and pharma groups can work. The procurement practices is a very critical element. There were questions around that, who's going to be a cost of all the things that is happening. If you have to move farmer to living income or to better yields or higher productivity, how does it do it? How the cost will look like, and why should a farmer do it? So this is where one of the important elements that we try and see, along with a private sector partner, is can we influence any procurement strategy across the supply chain? For example, can a roaster actually provide certain sustainability premium, what we call, or a lot of certification bodies call, across the supply chain, which could be shared with the farmers? A good example is our case in Vietnam, for instance. There is a low-carbon coffee program that is running in that country. We have partnerships from JD and a few large players such as Semaxo and Ecom who are partner there. And over there, there is a commitment from different stakeholders to actually see if there is a verification on low carbon, how the markets can pay for it. The consumer engagement is also critical, especially with the roasters and the brands who are out there, because at the end, these are consumer-facing companies. So in our work with Unilever, with the likes of Nestle, with likes of JD, one of the discussion always is, how do you build awareness in consumers? What are the ways in which consumers at the end can also wish to pay a certain price premium of the sustainable produced coffee? Is that possible? How do you do that? So that is another important element that we work very closely with our private sector partners. Traceability. In the previous session, EUDR was mentioned all the way. I think rather than talking of EUDR, let's talk about traceability. EUDR is a compliance requirement, but the key area behind EUDR is around transparency and traceability. So how do you do that? What are the mechanisms in which that could be done? Okay. So again, in case of Karnataka, I would again, like to emphasize this, and please do visit us later. The program that I was speaking about has an element of traceability integrated. The farmers don't pay for that service. It's the industry actors, it's their requirement. They are actually going to support majority of the farmers sitting in this room or outside on this part. It's an important element as a part of the supply chains which the companies have decided to invest in. It's not, just the investment from the farming side or from the government side. It's also responsibility of the actors across the supply chain, and they have already provided commitment around traceability for our Karnataka program. So please do, approach us later. And finally, how do you strategize this at a landscape level? Deepak very rightly mentioned, and Stephanie as well, that living income is not a coffee sector problem. It's not a problem, actually. It's an ambition which the entire sector, the agriculture sector, should work together. And you can only do this, you can only achieve it when you look at the entire landscape, when you look at farmers as entrepreneurs, when you look at farming as a unit which produces a lot of things, but a farmer as an entrepreneur also does certain activities. Where is the farmer earning from? What are the pressing issues where a lot of expenses are going? can you really optimize some of those things? Which are the other partners you need to bring in? Food security is an important issue. How do you integrate it into the livelihoods of the farmer? So this is where the landscape model actually works, and IDH has been working on this landscape approach in 11 countries now. And again, as I mentioned, happy to share these one-on-one. Please go to our website. A lot of information from IDH on landscape model is available in public domain. So with that, these are some of the examples, Paul, that I would, like to.
Thank you very much, Saurabh. And I'm going to move over to you, Nishant. Nishant, Walmart.org is the philanthropic arm of the largest retailer in the world. So can you just tell us, how does philanthropy work towards improving living incomes of smallholder farmers? And can you tell us maybe a little bit about how you see farmer producer organizations playing a role?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So, hi everyone. I'm hoping that the voice is clear. Yeah, cool. So I'll divide this question into three parts rather. So one is how Walmart Foundation that I'm representing today looks at philanthropy. So we look at philanthropy in a very strategic manner. What we believe is one of the key concepts that we are discussing, which is living incomes. How do you support improvement in living incomes, especially for the smallholder farmers? And one of the key elements there, we believe, is that it can definitely improve once we align the smallholder farmers closer to the markets. Unfortunately, what we find is that in a lot of communities, it's not easy, or some of the communities need help to get connected to open markets. And that's where strategic philanthropy comes into play, where we hope to build bridges between these communities and the open markets. And that brings me to the second part of your question, which is where the farmer collectives and FPOs come into play, because we do believe these FPOs can act as those bridges. These FPOs are built by the farmers, for the farmers, and they understand the production systems really well. Most of our work in philanthropy in India goes into strengthening these farmer produce organizations to help them get connected to market. And there are just so many advantages of farmer collectives in the shape of farmer produce organizations. Just to give you a quick glimpse of the work so far, so Sambodhi, which is an independent research firm, they conducted research on the farmer produce organizations and FPGs that were supported by Walmart Foundation's various programs. And since 2018, we have invested about $39 million into this ecosystem, which reach about 500 plus FPGs or FPOs, about 800,000 smallholder farmers, and more than half of them are women. Now what we are seeing here is that incomes are increasing. There is about 29% income increase for revenue increase for the FPOs that are part of the program because of aggregation that they bring both on the input and the output side. Once they are aware of the market expectations, they work with the farmer producers to translate that market expectations into the production technologies. They are also able to bring in economies of scale through value addition infrastructure. So in one of our programs, which is with TechnoServe in the Paderu region in Andhra, where we work with tribal farmers in coffee, what we have seen there is instead of selling the raw cherry of the fruit, once you have the wet mills established, you are able to extract a lot more price realization. You are able to extract a lot more value from the market because you are controlling a larger part of the supply chain. And individual smallholder farmers find it very difficult to have access to such infrastructure, whereas a farmer produce organizations can easily, not easily, but definitely look forward to creating this infrastructure which can be utilized by the smallholder farmers. One of the other key elements that we have been leveraging is the role of women in these farmer produce organizations. And what we have observed is that in our programs, what we make a very conscious effort is to drive a much higher engagement from smallholder women farmers at not just the farm level, but also at the enterprise level. And there, what we have seen is that wherever women farmers at the helm of affairs, the crop intensity improves drastically, the market connectivity improves drastically, because women farmers are the closest to observing very, very subtle changes in the production, right? They are able to observe very small changes happening in the crop. So they're the first point of contact between the farm and the market, right? So once you integrate them into the value chain, the outcomes are fantastic for everyone. So yeah, that's pretty much sums up the work that we do and our focus on farmer collectives.
Great, thank you very much. And we've really heard now from, representatives of every kind of segment that is working with farmers to help increase incomes, from public sector, private sector, multi-stakeholder bodies and philanthropic organizations, which is fantastic. And I'm working throughout the chain where we've heard examples of supporting farmers to increase their coffee incomes, increase incomes from diversification, and also supporting on that kind of market linkage, which is fantastic, because we're seeing not just increasing product production, but also increasing the price through quality improvement. We've heard from all of our speakers, but I have a few more questions. And actually, Stephanie, you were our first speaker. I'd like to come back to you with a question. So we've heard about some of the great initiatives going on, many of which are being driven by the private sector. Are there other key opportunities to increase farmer incomes that you would like to see the public and private sectors doing more of?
Thanks, Paul. I mean, obviously, there's lots of other things we could be doing, and we've heard a lot of the solutions. I think I want to build on something you said about the voice and ownership of farmers. And I think we need more farmers. We should have farmers on the panel with us, and it would be great to have more women farmers on the panel with us. So I think that's not just for representation, but actually to have decision-making power. So how can we look at the efforts we're doing? How could private sector learn from the evidence you're gathering in the Walmart Foundation projects? How could the Nescafe project share some of the agronomic learnings with your suppliers and farmer organizations? How could there be different investment vehicles for small farmer-owned businesses? I think there's much more need for investment in some of the ground-up solutions. Of course, those have high transaction costs, so we've been talking earlier around investment vehicles. And maybe just one other thing that the ICO, I think, is really trying to do is more cross-sector learning, or interdisciplinary learning. So the evidence that we have from the Araku case, can we learn from that for other countries that might be considering or have the capacity to think about large-scale transformational landscape-level investments? So those are a few ideas.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm going to kind of leverage off that and come to you, Sanjay. Obviously, Nestle being the biggest coffee roasting company in the world, some would say the company has the greatest responsibility. You spoke about what the Nescafe plan has been doing over the past 10 years, but maybe to some of the ideas that Stephanie has mentioned, I'd love to ask you, is the Nescafe plan working on any of those things, or what are really your plans for the next decade?
Thanks, Paul. Am I audible? Yeah. So, I just briefly mentioned about Nescafe Plan 2030. We are going to build on what we have been doing for we started in 2010 globally, 2012 in India. So whether it's to do with soil health, biodiversity, agroforestry, all the work which is being done, that continues. What we are going to do more and more now is to look at regenerative agriculture, how it helps the farmer community and the planet. More specifically, we are going to look at buying 20% of the coffee through regenerative agriculture. And 100% coffee, our ambition will come from sustainable sourcing. We're also looking at reducing GHG emission, greenhouse gas emission. We want to be, as a company, net zero by 2050 and half that by 2030. Also looking at various ways in which farmer livelihood and the social conditions get better. So you will see a lot of things happening. but this is going to be continuity of what we have been doing for decades. It's only going to build on that, bringing more technologies there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to just touch on the issue of some of the threats and challenges of farmers being able to achieve living income. And Deepak, I'm going to fire this as one of the probably my hardest questions, which I've saved for you because I think with your depth of experience in the coffee industry, you're probably best placed to answer this one. But you know, farm fragmentation, this intergenerational kind of division of land is clearly one of the biggest challenges that we see that results in many areas having, you know, majority of farmers living well below living income. And so my question for you is just based on your experience and your, you know, in your role, you're kind of in touch with farmers and all the way through to the roasters. I just want to ask you, what do you think the coffee industry can do about that particular challenge?
I think I agree that you've saved the toughest question for me, so thanks for that. I think the fragmentation of farm holding is a real concept, and there's no getting away from it. I think the way to deal with the fragmentation is to bring the smaller farmers together in collectives, the kind that Nishant mentioned. We have multiple examples across the world of farmer organizations working very well together, and we have examples of cooperatives and collectives not working that well together. The idea is to be able to take learnings from experiences and examples where things work very well and sort of transplant them in areas where we do believe there's scope for improvement. I think the other element around farmer fragmentation and the threat to the smallholder farmer is this whole vicious cycle of low prices leading to move away from the more marginalized farmers, consolidation amongst the larger producers. I think that's where probably the industry has a bit of a role to play, and quite honestly, the consumers have to be able to demand that from the industry in terms of having this whole diversity in the cup. The whole idea in the previous panel, if you were listening to it, was around what story will you tell the consumer if you only have coffee from 2 or 3 countries? So therefore, that is extremely important, and that will keep the small growers in countries which are marginalized engaged in coffee production and not drive them out of business. But in order for them to be viable and sustainable over a long period of time, we need to bring in structures in those communities, in those growing areas, to be able to aggregate and provide a collective approach towards commercialization of their produce. So that probably for me is the way forward.
Great, thank you, Deepak. That was excellent two-part answer. Thanks very much. We only have a few minutes left, so actually I'm going to ask all of our panelists a question. I didn't tell them that I was going to ask them some of these questions, but I'd like to ask each of you. So we have leaders from public and private sector in the room here, from many different coffee growing countries. I want to ask you, what call of action do you have for these leaders? This is your chance to get your message out there. What message do you have for them? What do you want them to do? And I'm only going to give you a minute to answer this question, so you're going to have to be quite succinct. So I'm trying to decide which side to start. Saurabh, you want to start? Do you want to use another microphone? Yeah.
First one on this difficult question. I think we speak about verification, transparency at farmer level. One thing, call for action, is verification, transparency, communication at all the levels in the supply chain. Be it trader, roaster, even the end consumer facing companies. If there is enough transparency in how things are working across the supply chain, and what initiatives or programs are the company working towards across the supply chain, I think so that would be an important call for action for me. Why to stop at farmer level? Let's have the traceability right from the farm to the fork at each company, each organization level. So that's one call for action from my side, which I really hope is achieved.
Thank you. Nishant?
So yeah, I'll double click on what I mentioned earlier. My call to action or our call to action would be to integrate women smallholder farmers at every step of the value chain. What we have observed, I already shared, but I just add one more, a small story. It'll get over in 30 seconds. And incidentally, there are some of the women CEO of the FPCs which are here today in the coffee exhibition area. And if you speak to them, you'll realize that a few years ago, they were not even recognized as farmers. But today, they're not just farmers, they're actually running business enterprises and thriving there. So I think if you look at the performance being of these FPCs, which are being run by women, you will figure out what to do next, right? So yeah, that will be ours.
Thank you, Nishant. And Stephanie, to you.
Yeah, I guess I would say that we should all organizations in the coffee sector ask questions about either our programs, our trading practices, our investment strategies, our policies. Are they really building systems, long-term systems for shared reward and shared risk, particularly for the more vulnerable people in the coffee sector? So small farmers, farm workers, people with lower land sizes, really be critical about that and share both our successes and things that are not going well so that we can improve.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. Sanjay, to you.
Very similar to what Stephanie said, I think across the value chain, if you were to look at it, and we saw some examples today, all of us know a bit. Farmer knows a lot. Farmer has actually, by virtue of the experiences, know what works for them. But at every end, whether it's a procurer or a processor or the policy maker, there is so much learning how to make sure that we accumulate that learning, aggregate it, and pass it where it's really required. I think if we all work together, we can really create magic.
Thank you, Sanjay. And Dr. Raghuramurala?
Yeah. I think the more and more requirements from the buyers are certainly going to put more and more pressure on the living incomes of the farmers, especially the small farmers, especially the small producing countries per se. We will not be able to, because the coffee in most of the small farmers holdings and smaller producing countries, they have been actually having a lot of sustainability concepts embedded into them. But whenever the prices are, fluctuating violently, whenever the low price scenario is there, the farmers have been really vulnerable. So I think there is a greater responsibility on the other half of the chain to actually enable the farmers, not only in terms of hand-holding, technology and other things, some kind of assistance, some kind of guarantee that their coffees will fetch a minimum price, which can actually help in bridging that gap in their incomes. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And Deepak, you get the final word.
So my call for action probably, and most certainly, is to the policymakers. I think we need to align needs, and policymakers both in producing countries and in consuming countries. I think we need to align needs and levels of readiness together and be able to formulate policy and decide implementation pathways in a way that will allow producing countries to be successful in terms of addressing to the needs of the consumption markets.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, we conclude this session. I want to say a big thank you to all our speakers and panelists for being bang on time. That was pretty impressive. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you very much. Before we leave the esteemed panelists, I would request Mr. J.S. Nagaraja, the Joint Director of Research, Central Coffee Research Institute Coffee Board, to kindly come over and felicitate the dignitaries. I would request Mr. Paul Stewart to kindly come forward and accept the felicitation. Mr. Paul Stewart, Global Coffee Director, TechnoServe. Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for Mr. Paul Stewart. Thank you very much. Kindly accept a memento also. Thank you. I would now request Ms. Stephanie Daniels, the Senior Program Director, Agriculture and Development, Sustainable Food Lab, to kindly come forward. Thank you, Ms. Stephanie Daniels, for your presentation, and please accept a memento also. Dr. Y. Raghuramulu, a retired Director of Research, Coffee Board of India. Thank you. I would also request Mr. Sanjay Kajuria, the Director, Corporate Affairs and Sustainability, Nestle India Limited. Thank you, Shri Sanjay, for your presentation. And now we move on to the stalwarts of the panel discussion. Mr. Deepak Kaul, Senior Vice President and Head EMEA and India, Olam Food Ingredients. Thank you, Mr. Kaul, for your participation in today's session. And after Mr. Kaul, I would call upon Mr. Saurabh Sinha, the Senior Manager, Lead South India Programs, IDH. Thanks, Mr. Sinha, for your presence. And finally, Mr. Nishant Gupta, Strategic Liaison, Walmart Foundation in India. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would request all the panelists to kindly come forward, and Mr. Nagaraja and all will have a photograph. So as the photograph is being taken, well, ladies and gentlemen, we could see a lot of photographs being taken by the esteemed participants, but some of you have forgotten one important place, that is near the registration counter, wherein you get the picture of Western Ghats, and as we talked in the inaugural session, from seed to cup, how the coffee is grown and made in the Western Ghats. Artists and creative directors have worked very hard to make that Western Ghats near the registration counter. If you have any doubts, you can ask the volunteers, and they will tell you more about the Western Ghats location here at the Palace grounds. And in a short while from now, we're going to have a musical evening. Coffee Board, Government of India will invite you, is already invited all of you for the musical evening, and this will be followed by a heartfelt thanksgiving to our sponsors. So let's give a round of applause for all the panelists. And yes, the serious part of it of today is over. We see you all tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But the entertainment is going to unfold in the next 20-25 minutes. So all of you stay back, enjoy the entertainment, and before you can also go over to the Western Ghats and take some pics. Thank you very much. Namaskara, and all of you, please take care.